Bring in Max Blumenthal, who is the editor-in-chief of the news website, The Grayzone. He joins me now from Washington, D.C. Max, it's good to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us. We're more than 100 days into this conflict. You can look at it from several perspectives. Numbers perspectives, 24,500 Palestinians dead. Over 500 Israeli soldiers have been killed as a result of this military aggression. From a milestone perspective, we've had a cessation of hostilities, an exchange of prisoners and hostages. Now we're seeing a deal that's been brokered by Qatar and France, possibly leading to more aid in. Where do we stand?
Israel and its patron in the U.S. are flying blind. They have no plan for the day after. They can't agree on a plan for the day after. And even if they could, it wouldn't be a feasible plan. Because as we heard from Netanyahu, there is no two-state solution on the table. There's no constituency for it in Israel. And the fact is, there never has been. As long as the U.S. fails to intervene, and they're not doing anything.
Max, you say the U.S. is flying blind, it has no plan, but it's actually sent two high-level secretaries, Secretary of State Blinken and the Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, hoping to convince the Israelis to sort of shift to a more tactical phase. I think you don't think that they're satisfied.
Well, we saw as the day after Blinken left the region, or soon after he left the region, the U.S. attacked Yemen rather than just simply orchestrating a ceasefire, which it could do tomorrow or today. It attacks Yemen and escalates. Then Iran follows with attacks. And so the U.S. is driving escalation, which was its plan to avoid. At the same time, Israel has every intention of escalating, and nothing is changing on the ground. The U.S. is sending in figures like Brett McGurk, who are basically channels for the Saudis, who themselves have no operable plan. And the U.S. is saying that they want the Palestinian Authority to control Gaza. Does anyone think the Palestinian Authority wants to ride in on the back of an Israeli tank into the Gaza Strip to take over, when you now have a new generation being born and growing up in Gaza without any home in a complete wasteland? It's completely untenable, this plan, which refuses any place for Hamas.
Do you feel that because the U.S., in your words, has no concrete plan on how to deal with this crisis, the spillover effect in the wider region, the greater region, is putting us in a more precarious situation, whether it's Hezbollah in Lebanon, the attacks that we've seen in U.S. interests in Iraq, not to mention the Houthis in Yemen, what they're continuing. I mean, they've essentially said to the world's most powerful military, look, we don't care what you say. We're still going to continue attacking vessels.
You have Biden and Tony Blinken, whose entire careers have been sustained and advanced by the Israel lobby. Joe Biden's taken more money from AIPAC than any active politician. That's the donor class that they're counting on to get them reelected. Then you have the Democratic Party base and the majority of Americans favoring a ceasefire that would end the attacks on Red Sea shipping. And you have the Ansar Allah movement in Yemen waging a military intervention that has been largely bloodless to stop genocide. So the US and the UK are actually escalating in the region to prolong and preserve a genocide, which is making Biden deeply unpopular among his own base. I mean, it really raises questions about the entire U.S. political system and whether the U.S. can call itself a democracy when everything that seems to advance U.S. interests in the world and Biden's political interests would point towards a ceasefire, and he's doing the exact opposite.
Max, in a year's time, the United States could have a new president. Talk to me about how this issue is going to play out in election season, and if there is a change in the White House, how it could affect the geopolitics.
Well, the most likely, the opposition figure in the United States is facing political prosecution by his rivals who are allied with the leader. It sounds like a scenario in a country where the U.S. would impose sanctions. And that opposition leader, Donald Trump, is leading in the polls. Donald Trump's top political patron when he was in office, the largest individual contributor, was Sheldon Adelson, who's now dead, but his late wife continues him. The Adelson family has also sustained the political career of Benjamin Netanyahu. So if Donald Trump comes in, he's likely to bring back Jared Kushner and the Likud gang that advanced the Abraham Accords, took the two-state solution finally off the table. And that's something that Netanyahu wants to see. And if Netanyahu ends this war at the same time, or is forced to agree to a ceasefire, his career comes to a crashing end. He faces 4 corruption trials, and his government collapses, and he faces all kinds of investigations for the failures of October 7th. So Netanyahu has openly stated that he intends to keep this war going for the rest of that year. What does that mean for Joe Biden? This hideous genocidal war, which has made Joe Biden so unpopular among his own base, will continue through November, and Netanyahu will have the positive ricochet effect of installing his pal, Donald Trump, who he's connected to through the Adelson family. So that's a drama to watch. And again, Biden has every interest in imposing a ceasefire, but it's so obvious who's in charge here. It's not him, it's the Israel lobby.
All right, Max Blumenthal, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much for joining us here on Teacher. I do appreciate talking to you. Great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, the Israeli army continues to